So thank you all for joining us this evening on our session around managing challenging behaviour. Hopefully this evening is going to give us a bit of a steer in what we can do to help keep our groups fun for everybody and safe, as well as sort of preventing that negative behaviour before it happens and looking at promoting positive behaviour as well. So what we're going to look at this evening, as I just said, promoting positive and cooperative behaviour at group nights. Obviously, that can be transferred over to residentials and camping trips as well, or days out, but we're going to kind of focus mostly on group nights. If we have questions and we go off tangent, that's fine. We're going to look at how we can overcome challenges as a group of volunteer leaders, and what we can do together to either find solutions to negative behaviour that's happened or prevent it from happening in the first place. We're going to look at safe resolution and prevention, and then we'll have some time for some questions. If anybody has any questions as we go along, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or pop a message in the chat, and I will try to answer them the best that I can. So next question, so we all clarify what we mean by challenging behaviour. What do we think of when we hear challenging behaviour? What kind of behaviours maybe have we seen in our group that have been a challenge for us? What can we think of that might be a challenge for other people? Got kids running off, not coming when we call for a circle, kids saying no when they're asked to join in with something, kids getting a bit too physical with each other and play fighting, inability to keep still or take turns. On the mentee, we've got refusing to take part. So these are definitely all things that I think lots of group leaders and volunteers have to deal with on a weekly basis. We've also got passive aggressive, maybe young people and adults, I guess that can go for sometimes, can't it? Okay, I'm going to go back to my presentation if it allows me to. So those are some of the ideas. We've got behaviour that disrupts the session on my screen, maybe sticking around for the whole session, but that's fine. Hopefully that doesn't disrupt our session. We'll come back to that in a minute. So as I said at the beginning, we're going to look at sort of promoting positive behaviour. Sorry if that blue writing in the middle is just distracting. Which is a good way to ensure that within our groups there is positive behaviour, and that we can try and avoid some of those negative behaviours, such as people play fighting with each other, people disrupting the session, people running away, and that sort of thing that we were just talking about, that people just said they've experienced or heard of before. So having a group agreement within our group, I feel like quite a lot of things kind of come back down to this when we're talking about challenges that groups have. So at the beginning of each term, it's a good idea to sort of re-look over that group agreement, or some groups might call it a group contract. And that will be a way for the young people to share how they feel everybody within the group might be treated. And it's a time for volunteers to be able to share how they think everybody should be treated, and also for the young people to share how the adults should behave, and for the adults to share how they would like the young people to behave. Once we've got that contract down, whether those are things like staying in the circle whilst it's the news circle, or going back to some of the things we've had before, not being violent, not using violence, only trying to be cooperative and kind to each other. Once the young people and the group leaders have agreed that that is the way that the group are going to behave, it's sometimes a good way to then call people out when they're not behaving in that way, and refer back to the fact that they've signed this group agreement or signed this group contract, and therefore they're kind of breaking the contract that they made themselves. Sometimes it also then encourages the young people to either come and tell an adult if somebody's doing something against that contract or that agreement, or also to call each other out on it and sort of remind them we're not meant to speak in the circle while somebody else is speaking, and that kind of thing. May seem obvious, but praise for positive and cooperative behaviour. At Woodcraft Folk, we're really passionate about kind of cooperating together. We're a cooperative organisation. So all of the activities that we do with young people that are around cooperation, even if that is, like I said at the beginning, on a camp or a residential where we're working in clans. Really make a big thing, make a big show of young people who are doing the right thing and being cooperative and showing the way. As adults and volunteers, obviously the young people are looking up to us, so try to model that positive and cooperative behaviour with our other leaders. Somebody said in the chat that sometimes there could be passive aggression within their group, and I'd like to hope that that's not to do with the adults, but again, if adults are not agreeing on things or not acting cooperatively and in a safe way, then young people are going to pick up on that and possibly, you know, imitate that themselves with each other. We can also promote a positive atmosphere by kind of reflecting and evaluating on things that have happened. Somebody else said that young people find it hard to keep still within sessions. So evaluating on sessions, and if lots of people say, we really didn't like that activity where all we did was sit down, then maybe it's about adapting what we're doing within our kind of program and within our activities where we're not just sitting down and we're doing different activities that fit with our group, as well as what we like to do, what we want to do to kind of get our aims and principles across and to do some non-formal education around a kind of bigger topic with the young people. So again, using activities that support cooperation that I discussed. Kind of what's really important to kind of get to that beginning of like promoting positive behavior and knowing our group is encouraging and welcoming the honesty within consent forms. So somebody said about young people with special educational needs. Sometimes that will be something that comes with a statement. Sometimes young people just have different, you know, everybody's got their own unique needs, their own wants, the own way that they behave. And it's really important if we can, you know, gain that information before sessions and get that from parents and carers, as well as kind of speaking to young people themselves about, like I say, what kind of activities do they like, going back to our group agreement and using supporting young people to kind of choose which activities they take part in. Can anybody think of anything else that hasn't been mentioned here, or anything here that they've tried before in their group and whether it worked well or didn't work too well?
I've just tried to reduce the amount of time that I'm asking them to stay focused. Mm-hmm. So breaking it up into 2 shorter bits of circle time, running around, then come back and have the explanation before the activity, rather than trying to do circle time and the explanation together, as a way of minimizing how long I'm asking them to keep still. Don't know if it's working. I tried it on Monday, was a bit better. I don't know, I'm looking for ideas, but
no, that's definitely a good thing of breaking up the different activities. And I think for most young people as well, it's really important to have that sort of consistent structure. So as you say, if you get into the habit of breaking it up like that, they know that if they're having a circle time, that it's not going to last longer, or it normally doesn't last longer than 5 minutes, and that they can sit there 5 minutes. If it's different every week, and sometimes in my own group, we can end up doing news for 40 minutes of the session. And that can be a real pain if you've planned an activity and you know that you're in a time constraint. But they get into the habit of that, then they expect it's going to be that long every week and everybody can share 10 pieces of news. So I think, try and get that structure and breaking it up is a good idea. Ted, were you going to say something as well?
I mean, I suppose it kind of fits with the program supports cooperation, but just getting the kids to plan activities and making it from them. I'm sure it's something that everybody does anyway, but that definitely, you know, a bit like having them agree on having the group agreement, I guess having that, well, you know, you've planned this activity, you requested this activity, so we need to sit down and we need to listen while the person explains what we're doing or whatever it might be. I think that has definitely been something that's worked really well. And I think just following on from that idea of the routine and the structure, I know we do the creed at the beginning. We do link your hands together at the end, like I'm sure everybody does. We don't tend to do news because I think that does kind of make everybody just sit down for longer than is necessary. But I think having that definite beginning and definite end kind of helps with that as well. So, they know that they need to come in for the circle at the beginning, but then actually what happens next is that they get told the activity and then they can go off and do it.
Yeah, it's really, really helpful, I think, to our volunteers as well, to know what that structure is and know roughly how long things take. And what to expect. Ellie.
So we just reviewed our agreement with all the kids, because we had a couple of really tricky group nights with lots of new kids, and we have different parents that run the sessions each week. And yeah, we had a couple of really tricky ones, and we found news. We had lots of kids saying no news, no news, no news. So we asked them to do something really specific. We said it really helps to know what your day's been like before you've sat down, because then it helps us all kind of realize if you've come and you've been really frustrated. Or so we kind of asked them during news, can you tell me something that's happened in your day? Or we did something that someone's been kind to you that made you feel, how did it make you feel? Because we had a few kids that were unkind the week before and kids that got really upset. And so I found that giving them a bit of a topic, we won't do it forever, I'm sure, but at the moment the topic around news, and I just don't really let them do no news. I kind of say, well, come back to you. So everyone kind of has to contribute. And I think then when everyone started the session contributing, I found in those sessions everyone's kind of participated in the whole session. Whereas if we start off with lots of no newsers, they tend to be the sessions where everyone's doing their own thing and it's a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think it is really important to try and sort of gauge the mood of the group, as you say, before we actually begin. Because if somebody's had a really bad day at school, or somebody's had a really, terrible afternoon, they've been caught in the rain or something like that, then we, as volunteer leaders, we need to be aware of that as we go into the session. I think that's really important. What I sometimes like to do, especially if I've got a big group, is kind of one word news as well. So tell us either a feeling or one word that we can imagine what happened to you in this week. If you got caught in the storm, maybe your word is just lightning. Think of the most, exciting word that you can think of that describes your week. Sometimes that does end up in some more explanation if they've got a really wacky word, but often it's a good way to kind of do a quick fire round. Great, let's move on. So what we like to encourage at Woodcraft Focus, that it's better to take steps to avoid unacceptable behaviour occurring before, rather than having to deal with it after it's taken place. So if we're constantly sort of reacting to things and we haven't thought about how we're going to deal with them, it's often a lot more challenging and a lot harder to deal with. So if we can try and prevent, negative behaviour from happening, then that is often better than sort of, as I say, just constantly reacting to things. So we talked about just now around kind of consistent structure for each session. I think that can really help to kind of prevent anybody not knowing what's going on. Often disruption and lots of talking can occur if people are unsure what's going on or don't feel confident with the next part of the session. So definitely having a structure for each session, maybe also letting people know if that structure is going to change. So we're coming into the summer months, so we might be doing more going to the park or going out for walks, playing wide games, where our structure will be slightly different to how it is in the winter, where we're inside and we're, sitting down maybe more or doing things within our venues. It's good to kind of give people a lot of warning, the parents and carers as well as the young people, so they can kind of reinforce that in the week as well. We want to create with our groups a welcoming, inclusive and fun environment for our group nights. So I think it's really important to remind the young people that the more cooperative and positive we can be, the more time we actually have to have fun and enjoy ourselves and include everybody in our activities. Often, if we do have challenging behaviour, volunteers can spend a lot of time dealing with that challenging behaviour, and you don't get to then enjoy yourself with the activities. So I think what can be really helpful is to plan with other volunteers how to deal with challenging behaviour, and try to make it so that it's not always one person who's dealing with the challenging behaviour. Because I think often, group leaders can go into categories and young people see them as, oh, that's the person who is always strict, or that's the person who always tells me off. If all of the adults and volunteers in the room are aware of how we're going to deal with challenging behaviour, whether that's talking in the news circle or something more more extreme, like being violent or something like that, then everybody should know how to deal with that. And obviously we're going to need support if it's a challenging situation, but try to have everybody who is present at the group night or at the camp or the residential aware of what we're going to do if we come to a challenge, how we're going to deal with that, and decide that together. This can also be really helpful for groups that are parent-led, because often you might have a situation where it's one person within the group's parent leading the session, and it's not always easy to kind of give consequences or to give warnings to your own child. And so you might want to have as part of your volunteer agreement together that you're not going to discipline your own child, and that somebody else will deal with that who's in the room. Or some groups like to have a kind of group guardian who's purely there for kind of behavioural overseeing, and might just be sitting next to somebody within that news circle who is often chatty or is known to, want to ask a million questions and that sort of thing, and just have them there as that kind of support to remind that person that they don't need to ask a million questions, or to, support, praise when they have been better at listening. And that we've already discussed kind of including young people in planning and choosing activities, again, helps them feel an ownership. If you have 15 young people and they've chosen 15 activities that you're going to do over the term, even if it's not that person's activity that they chose that week, then remind them that in 2 weeks it's going to be their activity that they chose, and actually we need to be respectful and cooperative with whoever it was that chose this week's activity. So remind them that their time will come when it's their activity that they really wanted to do, and that we should kind of treat other people how we want to be treated, and try and be as engaged as possible. So we should try and use managing behaviour, or try and include that in our risk assessment. So again, once we've come up with decisions of how we will manage disruptive behaviour or challenging behaviour, put that into our risk assessment, so that again, we know which adults are maybe going to be responsible for if you need to have a kind of quiet space for people who don't want to take part in the activity, making sure we've got adults within our risk assessment and within our plan who are going to be responsible for that space, or who are going to take people out of the room if they need to be taken out of the room, and that sort of thing. So making sure, again, just the last thing on here, that our adult to child ratios are adequate, and that if we get to week 3 of the term and realise that there is quite challenging behaviour within the group, making sure that we're adding to those adult to child ratios so that they're supporting the actual group that we have, and not just going with the kind of standard ratios. Sometimes we might need more adults to support the young people, the individuals that we have within the group. Does that make sense to everybody? If you have any questions, just jump in, or any other ideas to add. So overcoming challenges and challenging behaviour, that might be that people don't want to sit in the news circle, like we said, but group leaders having clear communication with parents and carers, like we said before, getting all of that information on the consent form, and also speaking as group leaders, making those decisions together, not just around consequences, but also discussing with each other behaviours that have occurred, and whether young people are aware of the behaviours, and whether they're being disruptive and positive, and also the positive behaviours that have happened as well. We should be listening to our young people, a bit like Ellie was saying, of how they're feeling, what they want to do, what they don't want to do. Again, looking at their kind of reflections and evaluations, and really using that to guide our programme for the next term. I would say a really good idea for the first week of term is to do that. What would you like to see this term? And then on the last week of term, asking them, how did you feel when we listened to your ideas? How did you feel when we were doing activities that you wanted to do? What was your least favourite activity? Sometimes that's really hard for us as group leaders to hear, that we put planning in and it was their least favourite. But it's really important to then know, okay, most people didn't enjoy this activity. We maybe will do it differently next time, or we'll do something different in next term, but on the same topic. Dealing with challenging behaviour is not always easy. So do ask for support from your other volunteers. And again, like I said, maybe you need some more volunteers to help deal with disruptive or challenging behaviour in the group night. Sometimes having some young leaders, DFs or young adults coming to the group can also, especially for kind of pioneers and venturers, and for Elfins as well, but be a really positive step to that kind of role modelling. Sometimes, especially in parent-led groups, can feel like to young people, oh, they're all just parents, they're just punch bags anyway, kind of thing. So it's nice sometimes to have DFs and young leaders coming along to show that kind of younger adult role model, showing them how to behave, cooperating with other people, and also making those relationships with adults who aren't their parents and aren't their carers, that they don't see every day, can sometimes be a really good way to promote positive behavior and to choose different activities. Sometimes DFs are better at running around and playing stuck in the mud with Elfins or with pioneers than I am. So having that kind of role model, young leaders coming along, even if it's just once or twice a term, or doing things with other groups. So if you're an Elfin group, meeting up with the pioneer group in your district, or meeting up with another kind of nearby group to do something together, again, can help to kind of promote that positive behavior, listening to each other, support volunteers being able to support each other and seeing how people do things slightly differently. So as we kind of just touched on, kind of discussing the approach beforehand with your other volunteers, what you're going to do if a young person says that they don't want to join in. That is absolutely fine. For some people, that's that they might not want to do every activity, and that's absolutely fine if we've got the provision for it. So if somebody doesn't want to sit in the news circle, or somebody doesn't want to play stuck in the mud, that's fine if there's a space within that room where they could sit somewhere and do something crafty or just have a quiet moment. If we don't have enough adults, then it's hard to make that provision for young people that don't want to join in. If you, like, lots of people respond to that when I've done this kind of session before, to say, oh, what if everybody doesn't want to join in? But as I said, I think at that point, if everybody doesn't want to join in, we kind of change course and we need to change the activity, which can be hard for leaders when we planned, but sometimes that's the only way to kind of get everybody engaged and back on track to be together and cooperative with the group. So it's kind of a good idea to look for causes or triggers to the negative behavior. If that behavior is always happening when you're doing a news circle outside because there's too many distractions when you're in an outdoor venue, then again, maybe do news inside and then go outside, or maybe don't do news that week, or have a different way of doing news whilst you're on your walk in the park, or whatever it is. Might be other triggers to negative behavior, such as that they all don't like one of the songs that we sing, or that they don't like one of the games that we played. If there is a game that half of your group really hate, so like half of a group might hate playing snakes in the grass because they don't want to crawl around on the floor, and the other half of the group might love that game, maybe have two games going on at the same time, again, if you've got enough space and the adults to do that. Or you just say, okay, we're not going to play snakes in the grass, or we're only going to play it twice this term. Give young people the kind of respect and to listen to them, and also show that you've listened by not doing things that they've told you they don't like. We've got another question. Any ideas for a child who often doesn't want to join in but cannot and will not sit outside the circle? So I think that, I don't know the ins and outs of this one, but if it's one child that doesn't want to join in and they want to just watch, then again, that's absolutely fine. I think we have to make provision for people who maybe like to see an activity happening before they want to join in with it. And sometimes that might be that, again, going back to snakes in the grass as a game, they might want to watch that happening for the first time. And then once they know what that game involves, they can join in the next time once they know what would be expected of them. That, I think, with a lot of it, with explaining the activity properly, could help. I think if there's one person who consistently doesn't want to join in, looking back to those kind of triggers of negative behavior or causes, maybe just talking to that young person, why do they not want to join in? And if you can't If you don't feel like you get enough answer out of talking to the young person, maybe talk to the parent or the adult that brings them each week and ask them, why do you think it is? What activity might this young person want to join in with? And then we kind of can go back to what we were saying before about everybody choosing an activity and kind of share that respect of saying, okay, you really wanted to do tie-dye, so we're doing that this week, and next week we're going to do wide games or something like that. And then again, it's kind of that balance of cooperating and respecting each other, that they might want to try something new and join in with something else. Can't force people to join in with things. We can only kind of encourage and remind them that they might learn something new, they might have fun, they might even enjoy themselves. That's what we need to try to get across. As I said, if needed, change the activity, have more breaks for games, or kind of brain breaks. Or lots of young people don't like the sort of in between activities, like we kind of said before. You can easily kind of get off track and start talking about Pokemon or something else, and then you're suddenly not in the session. So I think sometimes having the kind of seamless change between the game and the activity, and again, sometimes that's about having enough volunteers to be setting up the craft activity whilst you're playing the starter game, and not having that 10 minutes where you say, oh, we haven't even got the chairs out, or we haven't got the materials out. Having that time and that preparation can really help with kind of keeping everybody on track onto the next activities. Kind of disruption is that it's really important for our group to try and get to know each other the best that they can. So playing games like the sun shines on anybody who walks a group night, or the sun shines on anybody who likes football, anybody who wants to go to the beach, and that sort of thing can really help us get to know each other and get to know each other's personalities. And then we're more likely to know which activities the young people in our group will enjoy, and they're more likely to know which behaviours towards each other are going to be acceptable and not acceptable. So even playing a game of the sun shines on, people who feel happy when people are nice to them, or the sun shines on people who feel upset if somebody is rude to them, or doesn't respect them, or doesn't listen to them, can be a really good way of showing, okay, nobody liked it when they're not listened to, and so maybe we should do more listening to people. And I think especially for Elfins, that can kind of get across quite well of the fact that the whole group are feeling that, rather than just what they might think, just being just one adult being annoyed with them for talking in the circle or something like that. And yeah, that's really, thanks Ted for sharing that. I think also going back to what we said before around that kind of knowing who's going to be at the session. So I know when we're outside it can be a little bit different. Sometimes parents go, oh, it's a lovely evening, I'll stay in the park. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with what you said earlier, of sort of giving the adults roles that support the whole group. So any volunteer or adult who is at our group should be there for every child who is at the group. And I think that that's a really important thing to get across, especially with a sort of parent-led group, that actually you're coming here with your child and that is wonderful and you're both going to have a great time. But actually, whilst we're in this space and whilst it's 6:30 till 8 p.m. on a Thursday evening or whenever the group meets, we're here for everybody. And there might be times where if somebody's got an additional need or hurts themselves or anything like that, they might need, their parent or their carer to attend to them. But actually, whilst they're at the group, they're the responsibility of all of the adults who are there. So actually, we should really try to kind of encourage that culture that everybody's responsible, and again, like I said before, maybe within your risk assessment, within your group agreement, or within your kind of agreement as group leaders and as volunteers, you say, okay, if my child is the one who isn't, wanting to join in with the cricket or even worse, hitting somebody with a cricket bat or whatever it is, that actually that's going to be somebody else who deals with that. And that means we need to keep our eyes open for things that are going on, not just with our own child, so that we can help each other out. And I think that's really important for, again, not just singling out, oh, that's the one person's parent who always lets us get away with everything, and then having one adult who gets that kind of, oh, that's the really strict adult, we can't ever have fun with them. So I think, yeah, having some preparation, talking to the parents and adults who are going to be there in advance. This is what we come to next. So kind of supporting each other. Don't feel like you have to deal with challenging behaviour alone. You've got a group of volunteers around you who hopefully you can kind of share with the challenges that you're finding, whether we need to get more adults involved in the group, whether we want to reach out to DFs and young adults to come along to our groups as well, that sort of thing. We can also get in touch with Folk Office. You can get in touch on the safeguarding email, or you can get in touch with myself if you feel like you need further support or you want to discuss specific situations that are going on in your group as well, then you can do that. Again, modeling cooperation, working together with adults and being consistent. This again comes back to that kind of age-old thing of not having your favorites. If you're telling one person that it's unacceptable to talk in the circle while somebody else is speaking, that needs to be consistent to anybody who's doing that, whether that's our own child, whether that's a child that never misbehaves, whether that's a child that's always misbehaving. We need to be consistent with, you know, what the group agreement says, and when we're sort of calling out the behavior that we don't want to be happening in the group. Communicating with parents and carers, we've spoken about that. Treat everybody involved with respect, I think, is a really important thing. So even if, you know, somebody's come to you and said, oh, somebody else in the group has been violent towards me, they've been rude to me, you know, even if it's something quite drastic, then we still need to kind of treat everybody involved with respect and you know, listen to everybody and make sure that we've kind of listened to the child, we've listened to their parents, we've listened to the other volunteers who have been affected and are involved in the situation. So that's going to be the easiest way to try and find the solution that everybody's happy with. And if there have been instances where people have argued, or there has been violence, or there have been kind of rude words and that sort of thing, then it's really important to kind of try and speak to the parents and carers and let them know that that's happened, so that they can kind of ask their young person about it and maybe tell us. Again, like we said, if we haven't gauged how they were, they might say, oh, I kind of knew that might happen because they had a really bad day at school, or something like that, that brings back up again how we might want to kind of gauge the temperature before we start any activity. Coming now to the kind of recommended practice, which is kind of what we talked about before. Consequences is maybe like the wrong word, because as I said, it's not like a sort of school or more kind of formal setting consequence, but this is what we kind of recommend as practice that group leaders and volunteers can follow when they're with their group. So kind of distraction, as we talked about, avoiding confrontation, not kind of shouting at somebody across the room that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing if they're jumping on something or climbing up the wall or whatever it is they're doing, kind of distracting them with another activity, for example, helping to prepare the drinks, helping to get another activity ready, maybe even just reordering the folder or something like that. Then we might, if that behavior continues that we didn't like, if that was climbing on some of the equipment that's in the hall that you meet or something like that, giving them a warning, but be aware to pick your battles. If the distraction hasn't worked, or if the distraction wasn't appropriate, if the initial behavior was dangerous or putting people in an unsafe situation, we might skip distraction and go straight for a warning. Give a clear warning of what will happen if that unacceptable behavior continues. Is that, like Ted said, you're going to go and sit on the tarpaulin for 5 minutes? Is that you're going to sit out of the next game? Is that you can't take part in one of the activities that we've got in the evening? Make sure that is decided with the rest of the group and the rest of the adults, so that everybody knows that that's the kind of next step, rather than that being a surprise. And again, rather than that being people treated or warned differently. So try to move on immediately to another activity so that the child can succeed at something straight away and not repeat the behavior. So actually, if somebody stops climbing on the gym equipment that they weren't meant to be on, like I said, reinforce that with positive praise, that if they come back to the craft activity, telling them that their craft is wonderful, or asking them, can I help you with that craft? Would you like a blue coloring pencil? All of those kind of showing them the attention that, that maybe they were craving, or that maybe that's why they were acting out in the first place. So acknowledge the efforts that is being made to improve the behaviour. If they don't improve their behaviour and the unacceptable behaviour continues, then you might need to follow through with, as we said, what the group has agreed will happen with the warning you've given. Maybe that's sitting out of the next game. Maybe that's missing out on one of the activities that's coming up. But again, you've got to have the adults to kind of supervise if you're removing somebody from the activity and kind of telling them they can't take part in the next activity. Easier if you've got a space within the space that you're in where they can sit out or where they can have a moment to reflect. It might be that the what your group has agreed you're going to do is just that person is going to have 5 minutes to sit and think about what they could do better next time. Decide that as a group. A last resort is to remove the child from the group and to remove them from the immediate area if they're being violent, if they're being verbally rude to other young people, if they're being discriminatory, or if they're really kind of disrupting the session to the point that you can't, you know, the rest of the children are unsafe or the rest of the children can't carry on with the session. So at that point, give them a chance to calm down, ask, maybe speak to their parent or carer at the end of the session and say, you know, this behavior has been unacceptable. Maybe they should stay at home for the session next week and miss a week, and think about why this has happened. And that might be that also volunteers can reflect on what happened and maybe remove a source of disruption. We're not going to play that game again because when we play that game, it seems to get a little bit out of hand and there's a lot of play fighting. Or that we're not going to use whittling knives for the next term until people can, you know, show their responsibility to use them. So make sure that the discussion of young people's behaviour is happening privately so that we're not humiliating young people in front of each other. Try and remove them from the situation before we speak to their parent or carer. Don't do that in front of everybody else. Or, you know, try not to sort of, I don't really want to use the term tell off a young person, but try not to kind of, you know, humiliate somebody in front of all of their friends and the rest of the group. So try to do that in a private space, maybe after the session or wherever we have kind of the tarpaulin or another space that we have. So we've got further support, the managing behaviour guidance, which is on the website, the reasonable adjustment guidance, been talking a lot, which is also on the website, which is around that kind of making reasonable adjustment for people with additional needs, but also making reasonable adjustment for what works for our group and the individuals that make up our group. I've left that third point empty, which I apologise, but that should have the safeguarding email, which I put into the chat, and also my email. If anybody wants some further support, then they can get in touch with any of us at Folk Office who can help to share our experiences and our ideas. Sorry that we've gone slightly over 8. Juicy discussions. Does anybody have any questions or anything that didn't make sense or that they'd like further clarification on? Cool. Just a reminder as well that if you're looking for cooperative activities or starters or games that can kind of fill in spaces or activities that are small that really help with kind of bonding the group together and gelling that group together, if you check out the website and go to the activities archive, you can kind of filter down to cooperation. And again, maybe just doing 2 or 3 cooperative games a week, especially with Elfins, can really reinforce that sort of working together and not working against each other.